I'm gonna shout out the end thumbs up or anything from the teams. Some people online here was all right. Quick thumbs up just to make sure we're being
Yes, it's fine.
great. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so here we are. We're in panel 2 now. This is narratives across media adaptations. Starting us off is Bidyum Medhi. Bidyum Medhi is a doctoral candidate in the German section of the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures at Johns Hopkins University. His dissertation is titled Animality and Ecology in Post-Colonial German and Assamese Literatures. And today their title is Wild Dog or Dog-tailed Tiger, from the Holy Bible to Grimm's Fairytales, the onomastics of the wolf in the post-colony. And I'm looking forward to this one. So good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I start now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, and just let me know when you want to move to the next slide.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. First of all, I sincerely thank you all for the introduction and giving me the opportunity to be a part of this symposium. The paper I'm presenting today is a part of my PhD research, and it is still an ongoing project, so your comments and feedbacks are most welcome. While exploring the animal turn in contemporary German and Assamese literatures, Assamese being the state language of the Northeast Indian state of Assam, where I belong to, I, the human researcher, let the animal's traces, presences, scents, and noises guide me into the text I am dealing with. In the process, I have come across the dog-tailed tiger in one of the Assamese texts, which eventually compelled me to trace it across timelines and literary genres, ranging from the Holy Bible to autobiographies, scientific writings, as well as translations and dictionaries. Within my research, this I consider the most exciting finding, for it made a new dimension accessible in terms of the species concept formation and the shaping of the animal in post-colonial Assam. In my knowledge, so far, no study has investigated the onomastics of the wolf in Assamese, an animal from the canine family, historically non-native to the region. Next slide, please. Yes, so you can see Northeast India is not visible in the map, but you can see the habitat of the Indian wolf. So Assam is in the northeast, which is invisible on this map, like bordering close to Myanmar and Bhutan. Okay, in contemporary Assamese, the wolf is referred to as Kukur Nesia Bag. A direct translation will be dog-tailed tiger. And it should not evoke my concern because other non-native animals too were given names by the Christian missionaries in 19th century. Nevertheless, upon reading the first Assamese eco-novel titled Love for the Earth, published in 1995, I came across the wolf as a native animal. In a scene, the protagonist of the novel tells how the Assamese villages in the past, in the 1930s and 40s, functioned as a space for multi-species dwelling, a contact zone for humans and wildlife. I quote, "Back then, there were only 5 to 6 families settled in the new village. Among them were 2 Nepali families and 1 from the tea garden laborers. The rest hailed from their own village. Daytime was fine, but at night, wild animals would come close to the village. Tigers, leopards, bears, elephants, rhinos, wild boar, and wolves or dog-tailed tigers would often visit them." Quote ends. At first, I was confused because the wolf or the dog-tailed tiger is historically absent in the state, as you can see in the map. And given the exemplary knowledge of the author on native flora and fauna, the mistake was unforgivable. Since its publication, the novella has been part of the school curriculum for more than a decade. However, it took me a while to realize that it was not the author, but me, who somehow failed to identify the real dog-tailed tiger. In order to quench my curiosity, I sought help from the most reliable source I had at that moment and opened the first scientific book in Assamese on wild animals, titled The Wildlife of India, published in 1966. Trained in colonial forestry in the colonial era, the author, the former forester, writes on the chapter on wolf. There is no historical evidence of the presence of the wolf or the dog-tailed tiger in the state of Assam, nor has it been ever spotted in other northeastern states. But given its native name Kukurnesia bag or dog-tailed tiger, I believe in the past the animal must have dwelt in the region. Probably it went extinct due to excessive hunting by the locals. It was his contradictory remarks on the wolf that basically compelled me to trace the dog-tailed tiger further in Assamese. Having failed to find any satisfactory answer, I then decided to shift my attention from scientific writings to the primary source of the wolf among all Assamese texts available, which was the Assamese translation of the Holy Bible. The New Testament published by the British missionary William Carey from Srirampur near Kolkata in 1813. That is the first Assamese printed book. Printed 13 years prior to the colonization of Assam, the Bible is inarguably the first ever Assamese text to use the term Kukurnesia bag or dog-tailed tiger against the wolf. However, next slide, please. I continued my investigation with the later Assamese versions of the Bible printed in Assam by the American Baptist missionaries. You can see the picture here. Remarkably, translations of the Old and the New Testaments from 1890 and 1903 mention the wolf not as dog-tailed tiger, but rather as rangkukur or Asiatic wild dog, an animal native to the state. In Orunodoy, the first Assamese monthly newspaper published by the American missionaries, they too use wild dog instead of dog-tailed tiger. There is a news report. You can see the one of the news reports with the picture. It is from April 1852. It contains the news report on the children found among wolves. It contains a picture. It is the first picture of the wolf in a printed Assamese text. This report is crucial because while the English subtitle states children found among wolves, it is not very clear, but I hope you can still see it. The Assamese title states strange tale of the wild dog. An attentive look suggests the discrepancy between the British and the American missionaries naming the wolf. Firstly, the first Assamese Bible was translated not from English, but from Bengali. Now, this translation of Assamese Bible from Bengali posited a problem. The first all the Bengali translations of the Bible refer to the wolf as Nekre or Nekrebag. It is a Bengali name, and the wolf is native to Bengal. Remarkably, native Bengali authors use the same term against two different animal species, the wolf from the canine family and the leopard from the feline family. In contrast, the Assamese, next slide. In contrast, the Assamese indigenous taxonomy follows a distinct pattern. The term bag or tiger as a generic name is used only against the bigger members of the feline family in the wild. A valid explanation is that why the American missionaries didn't use dog-tailed tiger, because they not only had learned the language, but also lived in Assam for decades, and their profound understanding of the native taxonomy didn't allow them to use the term dog-tailed tiger for the wolf. Nevertheless, the mystery of the dog-tailed tiger remained unsolved, and I had to pay my attention to another source, the translations of the fairy tales and fables involving the wolf. Next, from 1950s and 1960s. The 1950s translation, it has some illustrations. There are 3 stories with the wolf in The Wolf and the 7 Young Goats. The wolf appears as dog-tailed tiger. In contrast, Hot caption, you can see that in the slide. The second story, The Little Red Riding Hood, mentions the wolf as Bon Rosa, a term, it remains ambiguous. Bon Rosa, a term used against the Bengal tiger in Assamese, meaning the king of the jungle. However, the illustration used in the story is of a leopard. In the third story, Three Little Pigs, the wolf appears as a Thekiapotia bonosa, a Bengal tiger. You can see the picture here, the other picture. Next slide, please. In the second translation from 1960s, the Aesop tales, the wolf and the lamb and the wolf and the lion, the wolf appears as dog-tailed tiger in Assamese. And you can see the real image of the wolf. Nevertheless, the later translations of Grimm's Fairytales and Andersen's tales by the same translator, Utlundu Hazarika, we see a change in Grimm's Tumbling from 1961, and the wolf appears as a Bengal tiger, whereas in Ugly Duckling, it is referred to as dog-tailed tiger without any imagery. You can see the tumbling with the tiger and the tumbling. A close reading of the translations by both authors reveals the only possible explanation for the shifting depiction of the wolf in Assamese, the size and species of the prey animal in every story. It suggests the dog-tailed tiger is an animal they were familiar with that possibly cannot prey on humans, as in Rotkäppchen, cows, or maybe even pigs. Frequent usage of various wildcats by both authors also strongly suggests the possibility of the dog-tailed tiger being a member of the feline family and not a wolf, a canine. Then I have gone through autobiographies of native writers. It's not on the slide, but to save time, I just end it in like 2 minutes. The autobiographies of native writers suggest a completely different aspect. What they suggest, the biographies without imagery, the dog-tailed tiger, it is a solitary animal living in thick forested area. And second, its appearance resembles a big male cat of the size of a jackal. Both aspects reject the possibility of the dog-tailed tiger being a wolf, a canine member. Finally, in order to identify the dog-tailed tiger, I turned towards my last primary source of research, the dictionaries. Kukurnesia bug, or the dog-tailed tiger, secures its presence in every dictionary in Assamese, edited and published by native scholars from colonial as well as post-colonial periods. Remarkably, all Assamese dictionaries refer to the dog-tailed tiger as a small-sized leopard. The 1932 Anglo-Assamese dictionary refers to the wolf as a wild beast of dog kind, but avoids referring to it as dog-tailed tiger. If the other sources maintain some ambiguity with the wolf and the dog-tailed tiger, the 1970s ended this discrepancy forever with two events. Firstly, the translation of the Jungle Book into Assamese in 1976, one of the bestseller books till date. Here, the wolf appears as the dog-tailed tiger with illustrations on the cover pages of both old and new edition. It has many editions. Next slide, please. Yes, you can see the old one is on the right. Simultaneously, the massive production and translation of Soviet children's books with regular illustrations into Assamese from 1975 until the fall of the Soviet Union further confirmed the association of the dog-tailed tiger with the wolf. Next slide, please. This is from Raduga publication, children's book, and there are many books in Assamese with this illustration. The wolf is depicted as dog-tailed tiger. The two autobiographies I mentioned earlier suggest another key aspect of the dog-tailed tiger, that is its arboreal nature. In particular, a native writer states frequent sightings of the dog-tailed tiger in the trees, putting the dog-tailed tiger's arboreal nature and the size of its prey animals from the translations together into perspective. One can rule out the probability of the leopard cat being the dog-tailed tiger, despite being its arboreal nature. Its small size does not allow it to prey on animals like goats. These findings further support the idea of the dog-tailed tiger situated somewhere between the leopard cat and the other big cats. In addition to leopards or Bengal tigers, there is only one other wildcat frequently reported in numerous accounts, that is the enigma. Next slide, please. The elusive clouded leopard, the biggest of the small cats, the smallest of the big cats, also known as the modern saber-tooth, one of the only two cat species that can climb down trees head first, the other being the marble cat. Nevertheless, while the wolf gradually while the wolf gradually began to occupy an increasing space in post-colonial Assam, through illustrations, the gradual disappearance of the forested tracts from the vicinity of the Assamese villages alienated the clouded leopard from the public memory. On one hand, encounters with the literary dog-tailed tiger in form of the wolf intensified. On the other, the dwindling dense forested lands further diminished people's encounter with the clouded leopard almost completely. Additionally, the absence of visuals in native writings and the standardization of animal names by the Forest Department accelerated this process. On one hand, the use of universal names in the production of scientific texts related to wildlife conservation projects fixed the animal's identity. On the other, however, this emphasis on only one vernacular name alongside the scientific name alienated a rich variety of vernacular names of animals from the public discourse. The opening remarks of the former forest officer on the wolf and the dog-tailed tiger suggest how the colonial approach on wildlife conservation has not only prevailed, but rather gained momentum in the post-colony by glossing over indigenous knowledge and human and animal entanglement. The unacquainted wolf entered the Assamese cultural production through colonialism, and with its continuous appearance through translations with visuals of all kinds took a perpetual identity in the public space. In contrast, the once frequently spotted arboreal dog-tailed tiger has not only been reduced to its another name, Gudhafutuki Bag or large spotted tiger, but also been now placed only in the pages of scientific journals. While it has become elusive to the conservationist, it has completely disappeared from the public memory. In the first Assamese eco-novel from 1995, the clouded leopard reappeared briefly as dog-tailed tiger for one last time and disappeared forever. Thank you.
Next, we've got Olimpia Mailat Gurghian. Olimpia finished her degree studies in translation and interlinguistic mediation in 2019, specializing in French and English as the source languages. In a MA titled Cultural and Political Importance of Animals in Science Fiction, she analysed the figure of sandworms in Dune in the novels. And currently she's a PhD student at the University of Valencia. And her aim is to further examine the relationship between non-human animals and humans in science fiction. Oh, thank you, Olimpia.
Hi, thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So hello, everyone. As you can see from the title of my presentation, today I will be speaking about Frank Herbert's Dune franchise, but I will focus on the film adaptations of the first novel. And by doing this, my aim is to examine the representation of non-human animal subjects within the medium of film, specifically these adaptations, comparing them to the source material and determining if parallels with factual non-human animals within. To help contextualize my study, I should also point out that one of the reasons I respectively chose to base my examination on these films and the literary sources is the fact that they are widely considered as representative and emblematic within science fiction, a genre that is generally considered as very useful in its possibilities to portray humanity's deepest concerns, our relationship with other living beings, and a playground to test the potential consequences of our own actions. But even more importantly, the links between ecology, animal presence, and humankind are extremely intertwined within the story that these novels and films portray, representing problems that, although fictional, are also reminiscent of real issues that we are confronting. And, oh, sorry, I don't know if I can change the slides.
Just
Can
let
I
me
do
know when
that?
you want to change.
Can you change it to the next one, please? Thank you. And as Castle and Champion reminds us, sci-fi texts allow readers to imagine alternative methods of seeing non-human animals, both on their own terms and with regard to their inextricable entanglement with humanity. And to this, we can add Jennifer Clement's description of the genre as an ideal testing ground for ethical concerns regarding non-human animals due to its speculative nature and a freedom from the boundaries of what is currently possible. Arguably, the same could be said about sci-fi in audiovisual mediums, such as films, of course. And that being said, why is animality such a key element in the Dune universe? To answer this question, we need to take into account the political stalemates and turmoil that permeate this story, where planets are ruled by noble houses under a new feudalist system, two of which, House Harkonnen and House Atreides, are essentially at war. And one of the main motifs that define their conflict is the possession of spice, an extremely valuable substance, the production of which is controlled by the native people of planet Dune, also known as the Arrakis. The origin and production of this substance is the most interesting detail within the examination of animality in this fictional universe, given that it is produced by the biggest non-human animal presence in this story, the colossal sandworms, creatures that are sacred to the Fremen, to whom they are known as makers, or referred as Shai Hulud and Old Man of the Desert. Can you please change the slide? Thank you. One of the most well-known adaptations of this novel is David Lynch's 1984 film, which is also known for some of the creative liberties and additions to the main narrative that the director has chosen to do. Interestingly enough, even though the portrayal of the sandworms is quite similar to the one depicted in the books, it's quite faithful, there are some notable additions regarding the animal presence in this futuristic universe. One of them is the Atreides family pet bug, always in the company, even during space travels and at wartime. His origin is never explained, and there seems to be no reason for it to be there. But even though this addition to the film's visual style and the treatment of the animal as an accessory are argued to be absurd or even comical, the choice of an infamously genetically altered dog breed is significant, considering that selective breeding and genetic mutations are core themes within Dune's narrative. Another addition is that of House Harkonnen's cat, used as part of a torture device. After administering a specific to the enemies in order to get their antidote, which is present in the cat's milk, the victims must milk the animal, which in turn is also trapped in an uncomfortable contraption. And once again, there is no explanation for why they would add a cat to the story other than just a different torture device to showcase the Harkonnens' cruelty. Other notable screen adaptations are the Dune and Children of Dune miniseries, the latter of which is well known for its portrayal of a human body and a sandworm's body merging to become a metamorphosing creature that will be significant to the narrative from an ecological perspective. Next slide, please. So this is the example of the human merging with the sandworm, but I will not spoil it. So next I will talk about the main film adaptation of my analysis, also being one of the most recent ones, which is Denis Villeneuve's 2021 and 2024 Dune Part 1 and Part 2 adaptations. Next slide, please. So these are the most noteworthy film adaptations, and I would argue that they are perhaps the ones with a bigger animal presence from all the audiovisual adaptations we have seen so far, seeing as they get to show the complexity of the relationship between the native peoples of Arrakis and the native animal species, as well as their political relevance. There are several ways in which we can see how non-human animals are used here, both as symbols and devices used in the interest of humans. If we focus on the sandworms, we will find that they are highly important figures within the cultural and religious frameworks that define the Fremen lifestyle. Their relationship is ambivalent, given that to the Fremen they are simultaneously sacred higher beings, but the products from the spice they produce to their teeth are highly valuable and used for their food, technology, weapons, and even religious rituals, for some of which they use the poisonous liquid known as the water of life, extracted from dead young sandworms' bodies after they have been drowned. Villeneuve's adaptation is especially interesting in its depiction of the process of extracting this substance, as none of the previous adaptations did so, and the literary source material does not provide a clear description of the procedure. So choosing to show this and to show the process of killing a sandworm is interesting, and I would argue that it's a depiction that helps audiences empathize more with these creatures. The rite of passage that the Fremen must go through in order to prove the bravery and worth that is mounting a sandworm is conferred an even more special meaning, considering the metonymy of sandworms as one with the desert. Taming such a creature means, in essence, to tame the desert, that is, to tame nature. The sandworm is called by creating a rhythmic noise, and after it's successfully mounted, its movements and directions are controlled by using two hooks that open the animal's scales, causing the sand to abrade its skin. Also, interestingly enough, the pain that the sandworm goes through, which is described quite well in the literary sources, is never really addressed in the film adaptations. Also, their use as means of transportation also means that they can be weaponized, as they are useful in wars, given that more than one person can ride them, and their immense size is highly destructive. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Their control, as well as the control of their spice, is a symbol of status for humans, as those who have the power over spice production ultimately have the control over the whole planet. Thus, the notion of the green paradise, that is the Fremen's dream of terraforming the desert planet, which is insisted upon during the film, presents an interesting dilemma that hasn't been posed so far in other adaptations. The changes that Dune would go through would not be possible without water, which is lethal to sandworms and their ecosystem. Therefore, their inability to adapt to such drastic changes would mean their disappearance and consequent extinction, which would be inevitable. However, that is never put into question by the Fremen, and it seems to be a problem yet to be discovered. But what is more, the colonization of the outsiders over Arrakis and the Fremen people is an active colonization that does not affect only humans, but also sandworms and other native species. Taking away their spaces, the deserts, and profiting from them is in itself an act of colonization, and therefore we might argue that we could perceive their actions, the sandworm attacks, as acts of resistance as well. So to conclude, I argue that these two recent adaptations are the most effective in portraying the human and non-human animal connections at the core of the Dune universe, but they also offer a visual ground to help us draw parallelisms between our treatment and exploitation of factual animals and fictional ones. Thank you very much.
So much, Olimpia, for that, sharing your research there. So this is the last one of panel 2. Now this is Bianca Friedman up next. Bianca started her PhD on the representation of horse characters' point of views in live action films in October 2021. She's a graduate teaching assistant and a member of the Centre of Human Animal Studies here at Exeter University. And her research interests include film theories and analysis, cultural studies, human animal studies and critical animal studies, and film representation and queer theories.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you to Council. Oh, thank you for coming and thank you for joining us today again from home. The title of my presentation today is From Page to Film Set, Diversified Representations of Force Resistance. Oh, see if it works. Fancy tech. No. I'll just do the next slide. I don't know. For once. Next slide. Thank you. So scholars have demonstrated that resistance can occur in a variety of forms and degrees of visibility. Moreover, they argue that animal resistance can unveil underlying dynamics and practices of exploitation and systemic asymmetries of power. Therefore, investigating how non-human animals' resistance is represented allows for a discussion of how narratives convey certain understandings of non-human animals' acts, which can destabilize conceptual premises and sometimes material devices of human dominance. This paper combines animal studies with questions of representation and adaptation, and focuses on one of the case studies that I discussed throughout my PhD research, in which I investigate the implications of the representation of force point of view. In this presentation, I argue that there are congruences between fictional narratives and discursive practices about force resistance, which reveal anthropocentric ways of thinking about force point of view and human-force relationships. My case study for today's presentation is the character of Merrylegs, one of the horses populating Anna Sewell's novel Black Beauty. Merrylegs is a pony with whom the title character becomes friend. While the first part of the paper focuses on the representation of this character's resistance in the novel and in Caroline Thompson's film adaptation, in the last part of this presentation, I discuss how the real pony's act of resistance is told by the filmmaker herself. Colling underlines that animals communicate through their resistance, and that it is important to recognize that animals have voices, even if different from the human one. Hence, acts of animal resistance are unmistakable demonstrations of communication and agency, regardless of intentionality. Many of the episodes described by Ron Broglio demonstrate that, and I quote, revolution of animals hacks the physicality of our own technologies and our bodies, and that by doing so, they expose vulnerabilities in our systems, end of quote. Scholars have underlined that the systems that exploit non-human animals are aware of the impact of their forms of rebellion. Indeed, these systems have been designed for anticipating and limiting non-human animals' resistance with a complex combination of physical and symbolic devices of power. In fact, humans have conceived and construed both devices such as enclosures, whips, bits, training practices, and so on, and narratives that diminish animal resistance to entertaining anecdotes, acts to be ridiculed, or seen as exceptional occurrences in order to discourage people from questioning abusive and violent systems. Anna Sewell's novel adopts the speaking animal device to speculate on horse characters' perspectives. As Sewell states in one of her letters, the novel aims to induce kindness, sympathy, and an understanding treatment of horses. According to Neiman, seeing horses as sites of affects was a feature which made it a key text for the emerging animal protection movement. Despite this general aim, Black Beauty's tension between a call for a change in the exploitation of horses and the fact that it remains grounded in the same system that allows for species hierarchies also emerges in the depiction of Merrylegs' resistance. At some point, Merrylegs tells Black Beauty that he normally helps his riders, but that he has also got rid of some of the young boys who were beating him. Merrylegs' comments shed light on how horses understand their riders' expertise adapt their movement, and have preferences. His resistance shows that horses can interrupt human-horse interactions that become unbearable. However, both his general behavior and his resistance are presented as attempts to educate young riders. He cares for his young riders who are under his charge when they're riding, but he remains irresolute when with those who treat him disrespectfully, whom he lays on the grass till they're able to understand. His behavioral adjustments contribute to the same narrative of the cooperative horse that is used to represent the character of Black Beauty. If his comments on his responsibility for young riders indicate somehow the pony's sensibility, they also contribute to legitimize a narrative in which horses are eager to be at the service of humans, even in acts of resistance. The film adaptation, unlike the novel, gives a human voice to Black Beauty only, who is spoken by a voiceover. In the adaptation of the scene of Merryleg's resistance, he makes a rude boy slide off his saddle. After this, the pony runs away and opens the horse's boxes in the stable, freeing his conspecifics. This form of resistance is described by Collinger, who refers to episodes in which animals have freed not only themselves, but also others. However, the cheerful music dialogue between piano, brasses, strings, and flutes is at odds with the little horse's frantic movements. This discrepancy between score and images, enhanced by the two giggling girls, connotates this scene as a funny moment. Therefore, the following sequence in which he opens the gates appears like a trick enacted by a pony with a mischievous personality, and not as a serious act of resistance due to distress. This narrative dynamic is in line with humans' tendency to intentionally underplay non-human animal resistance through humor and ridicule, in order to reassert power dynamics of non-human animal exploitation. Humans predicate any convenient narrative that is in line with, responds to, and sustains stereotyped visions of human-horse relationships. As Stuart Hall argues by referring to Richard Dyer, stereotypes get hold of a few simple, vivid, memorable, easily grasped, and widely recognized characteristics about a person, reduce everything about the person to those traits, exaggerate and simplify them, and fix them. End of quote. It is relevant to notice that in this case, the stereotyped person is a pony. Ponies are generally associated with children, since because of their stature, they're usually the first horses being ridden by kids and teenagers. Consequently, ponies' behaviors and resistance are likely to be trivialized through humor and downplayed as playful acts. Indeed, while Merryleg's resistance is represented in this way, the film depicts another horse's rebellion as dramatic and serious moment. Moreover, stereotyped visions of ponies are also intertwined with the construction of cuteness. As Claire Parkinson observes, trivialization belies the power dynamics of cuteness, synthesizes aesthetics and infantilism, and has serious implications in relation to the power differentials between a subject affected by cuteness and an ostensibly powerless cute object. Next. Lex, a grey crossbred Shetland Welsh pony brought to the UK from the States just for the film production, apparently did not like one of the grooms who worked on set. For the adaptation of the scene that I'm discussing, Lex was, and I quote, trained to pull the handles, drop them on the ground, pull the next one, and drop. However, because the groom he did not like was behind one of those box doors, when Lex reached it, according to the film director, he pulled the handle and threw it over the door, hit the guy on the head, almost knocked him out. Horses can remember those humans who they do not like and act accordingly. However, the subtle humor of the director's comment unveils the same intent of neutralizing the pony's resistance through ridicule enacted in the representation of this scene. People working on sets are expected to respect daily plans and time-constrained schedules. And any disruption can affect the overall organization and cause economical damage. Horses used in film productions are no exception, which is what motivates this scrupulous and utilitarian selection of specific individuals on the basis of their ability to satisfy human requests. However, the fact that even the most cooperative and trained horses can have moments of resistance demonstrates that, despite the use of diversified forms of coercion, they can create temporary impediments to the film production. By behaving in unexpected ways that disrupt the expectations of filmmakers, horses enact a crossing of conceptual borders, namely of social conventions and normative ideas about animals, and destabilize ideas about how animals should behave and act and where they should be located. However, making jokes about the resisting individual neutralizes their acts of rebellion and resituates them within the same ideological and material oppressive system that wants them well-behaved and cooperative. Ultimately, jokes and anecdotes regarding the difficulties of working with rebellious equines are functional to discursively suiting the cogs of the anthropocentric production culture of films that heavily relies on the exploitation of non-human animal labor, which is trivialized by telling episodes of animal resistance as funny. To conclude, this paper I demonstrated that there are congruences between fictional narratives and discursive practices about horse resistance. Sewell's novel is an example of the fact that imaginative insights on horse perspective coexist with narratives that crystallize horse identities, which are connected with contextual understanding of horses as part of and serving the 19th century British industrial society. Therefore, even Merryleg's resistance serves the anthropocentric purpose of educating young riders. The film adaptation's discrepancy between sport and images is used to trivialize his resistance and present it as a playful reaction. This way of presenting the pony's rebellion as not serious is intertwined with stereotyped visions of ponies, who are infantilized and depicted as merely cute. Their resistance is thus neutralized by being depicted as a fun act of divergence from the script of the cooperative pony. Similarly, this is what is implied in the anecdote told by the filmmaker as regards Leg's act of resistance against a disliked member of the film crew. The contextual circumstances of his reaction are not explained, but the episode is worth being told as an example of a cheerful impediment occurred during film production. So if narrated and talked about through anthropocentric and exploitative frames that disempower, diminish, and oversimplify non-human animal individuals, the complexity of their agency and labor remain unseen. Manipulated through narratives and discursive practices that may simply be framed, according to human expectations. So this is for me today. Next slide for the references, and final slide for thanking you for your attention. If anybody's got any questions, please do raise your hand.
Yeah, hi, lovely. Thank you so much, Bianca. I'm gonna go to you first. I have filmed with animals myself, so which is quite interesting because I think there's a lot of safeguarding nowadays around how you like do animals on set and things like that. I just wonder whether you have like and you mentioned the production culture by Cuthbert, which is really interesting. So I think, you know, there's definitely something in there kind of like research-wise with good practice, with non-human with animals, let's say, right? Not just, you know, non-human actors, but animals in general, which would be quite interesting to explore. Because I think, you know, I had students, for example, recently filming with a dog. They were actually filming with a dog handler. They were interviewing him for a documentary, and the dog really reacted to the camera and got really aggressive. And again, you know, there was obviously no media around or making fun of it or anything. They obviously took it very serious because it's a new generation as well. They don't want to infringe on any kind of animal or anything like that. So I just wonder whether there is some kind of, you know, whether you could kind of look a bit more into what you think about the production process in general. How much have you looked into that? And are you interviewing people there? And are you thinking of going any further?
Okay, thank you very much for this this question, which is absolutely, it is so interesting that I dedicated a chapter of my thesis to it. So it's like, I'm not going to go to all the details of this, but I haven't done interviews, just to start from the end of your question. I haven't done interviews, but I've looked at existing interviews and videos, behind the scenes, production material, anything I could find without, you know, the use of participants. And is there a way, like, you're asking it like about practice, good practice. Is there any such thing as a good practice though? Because I mean, we're using, I mean, filmmakers and trainers, and so all the people involved in film production that involves real animals on set, they are exploiting an individual who cannot really express their consent or dissent to, you know, participate in this thing, even though we treat them respectfully and with vets and you know, many figures around.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yes, there is like there is obviously more interest in generally speaking in preserving animals' well-being, but it's a very difficult ground on that side, because obviously, I mean, hopefully that no one will watch this recording, but anyway, no, but I mean, the American Humane Society is a very controversial institution because it doesn't guarantee anything. It only guarantees for the things that happen when the camera is on. So when animals, for instance, are moved from a location to another, or they're located in a particular place, location, barn, whatever. I mean, if anything happens to them in that situation, they're not responsible for it. And this happened, I think, during the filming of the Hobbit trilogy, or I can't remember exactly the film. But so, and what I do in my chapter is that I look at different size of the involvement of real animals, so from pre-production, so the training, and also to the production and the ethicality as well. I touch upon the ethicality itself of filming in situations that can potentially put the animal in distress, because if it can potentially put the animal in distress, we shouldn't, I mean, ethically speaking, we shouldn't be allowed to do that. I mean, we shouldn't feel allowed to film them, but we do. So, and this goes exactly for documentaries. I mean, scenes of suffering, scenes of animals giving birth. I mean, they're really delicate situations. And for this adaptation of Black Beauty, for example, they gathered, I can't remember how many, but many mares who were pregnant and about to deliver their foals, and they waited until the last moment. And at some point there was a complication. Fortunately, nothing bad happened, but I mean, it's a very stressful thing. I mean, generally mares deliver their babies when nobody's watching. And this is kind of a joke between OC communities. Oh, we never see the birth of the actual birth of the foal. This is so bad. Sorry, running, taking too much time here, but it's a huge thing. And but I mean, I don't think there is
a totally ethical way to bypass this problem. Probably the only thing is avoid using them, exploiting them for film production, I would say. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully this answers your question.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any more questions for any of the three speakers? Yeah, Carsten.
Yeah. Question. Yeah, for Olympia. Having recently watched the new Dune movie in the cinema along with the rest of the world. I was quite struck by, obviously you talked a lot about the sandworm. There's also obviously the depiction of like the little mouse, like the desert mouse, and how they almost, I don't know, in my mind it almost seemed like these juxtaposed kind of concepts, and yeah, I just found that quite interesting, the relationship between those different ones. So I just wondered, yeah, if that's sort of something you've written about in your writing, and what the kind of the significance of those two kind of non-human animals kind of being present in the story is.
Yeah, so I didn't want to get into all the other animals because the sandworm is, well, it's the biggest one, and it's a big part of the story, but there's definitely more animals, and they usually serve similar purposes. I mean, for example, the mouse that you mentioned, his use is nearly symbolical, and actually the name of that mouse is actually more important than the mouse in itself, because if you've watched the movie or read the books, you might remember that Muad'Dib, the name of that species, of that kind of mouse, is the name that the protagonist adopts in order to get into the Fremen culture. And to the Fremen, the significance of that mouse is also symbolical in the sense that they see the lifestyle that this animal leads as an example of how you should be living in the desert, of how you should save water, and they see it as a very intelligent and inspiring animal, but that's it. And then something that I've also found interesting in Villeneuve's adaptation is how he used other animals like birds. There isn't a lot of explanation behind. Sorry, my cat is playing. So sorry. There isn't an explanation of why those birds are in the Fremen Sieges, which is where they live. But there is a very impactful scene where we see the Harkonnens, the bad guys, burning all these birds alive. And we might assume that they use birds for communication and for, just as pets. But as I interpreted that scene, they used the imagery of the Harkonnens burning those birds as a symbolism of the Harkonnens burning the Fremen alive, or being so hateful toward them that they wouldn't anything else to remain behind them. Like they would even burn their own animals just to completely erase them. So yeah, there's lots of imagery that's interesting from an animal perspective, but sandworms are like the main animal presence. I don't know if that is related to your comment on that.
Thank you. Might have time for one more question, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. My question was for Bianca. Yeah, really interesting presentation. And I thought that what struck me is the way you were talking about how, at least from a production perspective, sort of making light almost negates the subversiveness of acts of animal resistance. And I wonder if that might be not necessarily flipped on its head, but kind of rethought or challenged on a diegetic level, in the sense that maybe there's a way in which deriving humour from acts of animal resistance can kind of formulate a way in which it renders absurd kind of some of the things that humanity cares about. So I was thinking about the scene you were talking about in which the horse sort of bucks the boy off, and whether or not we can interpret that as kind of I don't know, like a a rejection of our own sort of anthropocentric self-importance, and whether humour plays a part of that, or whether you think that seriousness, if we're saying as a kind of dichotomy, is the best way to go.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. I haven't thought about it, to be completely fair, also because having some knowledge of horses, having some background experience myself, and specifically in this theme, seeing it as portrayed as specifically with the score, with that kind of score, it was very uncanny for me, because those gestures are clearly signs of distress. And I wonder, I mean, again, to connect with this issue, with the question before, I mean, I don't know how they actually reach that point of, ethically having that gesture on set in order to serve this kind of idea. I guess it may be used as a way, I mean, it obviously, there, I mean, if you put it that way, I guess there's this scene also, mocks the boy who's treating him badly, because he's, because of, I haven't mentioned that, but just before the boy jumps on, the two little girls that are walking with him, and there are two of them on a pony, which is like a lot for him. But and he's perfectly calm, and then when the boy steps in, he starts doing his thing. So it is probably, yes, it can be read as a commentary on how ridiculous a human violence can be in respect to animals. I haven't thought of it that way. That's all. But it is potentially, yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had the question for Olympia about Dune. So it's a really interesting talk, and it's like one of my favourite films and series of books. And I just wondered if, without kind of any sort of spoilers, but if you sort of research had gone further into like the book series, because I hadn't quite thought of the sort of sandworms and actually how like important they are for like the world and like the spice. And I don't think it goes into it in as much in the film, but there's like in the books it kind of goes into how basically everyone's addicted to the spice and they can't stop having it. So if the spice stops flowing, like the whole of society will kind of break down. But I just wondered if you'd kind of gone a bit further into the books, into kind of the importance of the sandworms when they start going on to like other planets and some of the other kind of weird non-human kind of hybrids they have, like chair dogs and snakes and things like that kind of appear like much later on in the narratives.
Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned the chair dogs.
They're so weird, right?
I know. Yeah, so my research at the moment, I'm basing it on the first 6 books, the ones written by Frank Herbert, but as you probably know, there's loads more. But yeah, I think the story of how sandworms evolve and how their ecosystem changes is very interesting, because this is a bit of a spoiler, but the planet Arrakis changes a lot depending on the desert stops existing after the terraforming takes place. So as a consequence, the sandworms stop existing on Arrakis as well, eventually. So that is very important, because their existence also changes the political framework and changes the interest that humans have in regards to their well-being. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know yet if I'm going to be able to get into the rest of the books, but I do want to focus as well on the future adaptations, because there will be more, and the video games as well, because I'm very curious about how they're planning on portraying sandworms, if they're going to get into a bit of their story, because we don't know that much about how they came to be, about what kind of species they are, or how they came to Arrakis and how they started changing the ecosystem. But I think it's very interesting, and there's lots of things I could say about them. And yeah, chair dogs, as you mentioned, there are many hybrids, human hybrids, and they are very weird, they're very strange, but they also contain interesting messages about the relationship between humans and non-human creatures. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a super quick one.
Okay, go for it.
It's just a really super quick one for Bidyum. So your talk is really, really interesting. I was just wondering just very quickly about linguistics. So you mentioned that it was in Bengali, but like I did a very quick Google and found that that language is not recognized in Assam as being like the national kind of languages, because I know that there's lots and lots of Indian languages. So I just wondered, was that something to shift between like 1853 and what's recognized as languages now, or just anything about the kind of linguistics, about the terminology? I was just kind of curious about.
In Bengali, you mean? Or both
in Assam, in the region, I just did a quick Google and it said that Bengali, while it is spoken by a portion, it's not recognized as like one of the main languages.
So when Assam was colonized, of course, it was colonized much later. And then Bengali was made the official language. So like that's how, I mean, even if you see the first Assamese Bible published from Bengal, it does not use the term Assamese because it didn't exist. It's just an Assam language. It didn't exist. Only when this is the linguistic identity. And then when Bengali was made the official language until 1873, then they had to establish this Assamese as a separate language. The missionaries, of course, helped in the process, but with the animals, again, this is I guess because I was looking at the animal lexicon in Bengali and in Assamese as well. So in this case, because Nekre and Nekrebag, I was also reading colonial period Bengali, native Bengali authors hunting stories, and then they used both. And then some of them had pictures with Nekre, but then that was for leopard. One can see that. And in Bengali, in Assamese also, an animal has multiple names. In Bengali, so the cheetah is called tendua, but in Hindi, tendua is used for leopard. In Bengali, leopard is called cheetah, but leopard is also called nekre. So it's mixed up. So there was this always this problem in identifying animals in Bengal. At least this is my experience. But this is how it shaped the translation of the Bible into Assamese, because it came from Bengali first, and then of course there is this change, and then because it took me some time to realize why the American missionaries did not use the same terminologies as the British missionaries did, because they directly translated it from Greek and then Hebrew, and not from Bengali. I mean, this is how I could see the differences, and then it evolved over time. So when they translated the Bible into Assamese, they had to create so many words. So hippo, it is in Assamese. If I have to translate it into English, it's funny. It says water elephant, the ostrich. Now it becomes camel bird because it did not exist. They had to create words for hill, because in Assamese until 1930s, only mountain exists and not hill. So they had to create those words, and then they had to create words for ice, for snow, for olives. In fact, the whole idea of just one, probably before I stop, the cross, how they describe the cross, where the concept did not exist at all. So they had to use the Ferragoni. Ferragoni is the branch of a tree. And now they use Perangoni. They had to create that word because cross did not exist. So it's a different, whole new avenue. Of course, in my PhD, I cannot, go beyond certain point, but then this is my project for my post PhD time. Yes, this is where I'm going to look at how they introduce non-human all entities, be it like hills or ice or anything else for that matter.
Wow, thank you.
Interesting. Okay, thank you everyone. So we're going to wrap up panel 2 now and break for lunch. So people could use the link for those online. You could use the link for panel 3, and we can reconvene at around 1 to 2. Okay. All right.
Thank you.